You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkmann. Upstairs at Seattle's Museum of Pop Culture, MoPop, right now, you can take a trip through the musical genres and artists that trace the arc of Black history in America, from gospel foremothers like Rosetta Tharpe and Mahalia Jackson to the soul songs of Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder. The exhibit is called Never Turn Back, Echoes of African American Music. And I recently caught up with curator Adeerya Johnson, who took us on a private tour of the exhibit.
Well, first of all, can you just introduce yourself and tell us where we're standing right now?
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. My name is Adeerya Johnson, and I am the associate curator, but I am the lead exhibition curator for Never Turn Back, Echoes of African American Music. We're on the 3rd floor at MoPop, the penthouse. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really happy for y'all to be here, so yeah.
And tell us, how did the concept for this exhibit start?
So I love Black history, and I love music, and I love photography, and so I really wanted to highlight how expression is depicted through photography, and what better way to do that through looking at just the history of Black music. And I feel that, anytime that I've seen performers or Black artists performing live or in photos, it always looks so passionate, and I really wanted to convey that in this exhibition. And then leaning on my skills and my background in African American studies, adding that element of history, and also highlighting that for Black people, pop culture is really tied to our history. And it's not the best history, but that is what makes our expression through pop culture so unique. So to do that and Never Turn Back was really the focal point of how this exhibition came to be.
So when we first entered the exhibit, there was something that caught my eye, and that is a very red, very bedazzled cape.
Yeah.
Tell us, whose cape is it? I think I can guess, but whose cape is
James
that?
Brown, the godfather of soul. Hey.
Get up, get on up, stay on the scene. Get on up like a sex machine. Get on.
It's actually one of 2 James Brown pieces we have in the exhibition. So when you come into the gallery, you'll see this really bright, shiny red sequin cape, the classic cape that he's used in dozens of performances. So to really have that stellar piece welcome folks into the gallery really opens up the idea of what are you going to see in here. So it's the best piece to put in just to welcome folks into the gallery.
It's the piece that you see him, he's down on his knees, he's on the stage, he doesn't know if he can go on, but somehow he does.
Because he's the godfather. He's the godfather. It's so great.
We're obviously standing in MoPop, which is a melted Jimi Hendrix guitar, basically. And so there's no doubt that MoPop's DNA runs through Black music. For you, when you were thinking about genre, for example, how did you want to approach kind of the progression of what people would experience when they walk through the exhibit?
I think for me, I wanted to tell a chronological story, but also highlight the nuances between sacred and secular music. And I think also to tell the history of Black music, there is a timeline that works. But I think also to highlight this essence of echoes, how each genre blends into the next, kind of help narrate what this exhibition is. So I totally could have added, an R&B section, or I could have added a funk section or a disco section. But gospel, blues, jazz, and soul are really those strong pillars that get us those other subgenres like ragtime or new jack swing or hip hop. So to really conceptualize these bigger things, it's also that skill in curation. So I think again, to build on those 4 genres really help tell a story and map out this history. And then again, it allows for really cool interactions and interactives that we have in the gallery.
Maybe could you walk us through and show us some of your favorite parts? Yeah.
Adeerya and I walk into an alcove awash in deep blue light. It gives the impression of being surrounded and restrained with the sounds of a large wooden ship creaking in the background.
So the first section, when folks come into the gallery, they step into dark waters, which almost encloses the visitors a little bit to think about what does an uncertain future look like. And I think the interesting thing about creating dark waters is to put people in the space of under a slave ship. And it's a hard history, it's a dark history, but again, it cements the foundation of what Black music leads into. And I think, again, when it comes to understanding privilege of not identifying as a Black person, this space creates this sense of, unease that Black folks have also experienced, but it is to provide reflection. So there's tons of questions in here. There's a lot of call-out text to really get folks to think. So this has been designed as a thinking space, a reflective space, before folks really get to understand the impact of the history from the beginning of 1619, when the first, enslaved Africans come to the Americas.
And out of this painful history, we have the way that some of this was channeled into these genres of music that you mentioned: gospel, blues, jazz, and soul. What's next for a visitor in terms of where the music takes us?
We're going to go to gospel.
We're going to church. I see the church stained glass, beautiful window.
Yeah. I mean, for this section, I really wanted to lean in on these early oral traditions, looking at these early elements of gospel music and sound, but also culture. The fact that the Black church is a safe space, is a community space, and the ways that a lot of the early gospel artists found their home in the church, but also found that vocal strength. And so a lot of the photography in here is to capture that essence, that emotion, but also to give insight into what this Black church looks like. And then again, highlight the Black South. Again, we're thinking about the antebellum South, we're thinking about early Jim Crow, we're also thinking about just the rise of the civil rights era, and again how gospel music is the backdrop and soundtrack for these movements.
I'm sometimes up and I'm sometimes down, coming for to carry me home.
So as we leave gospel, I want to take you all into blues, which is one of my favorite sections of the exhibition. When I thought about blues, I really thought about the South, but I also really thought about Black women. And I had to dedicate a section over here that highlights Gladys Bentley, that highlights Ma Rainey, looking at, Big Mama Thornton. Again, I think oftentimes when people think about the way that women occupy music, specifically Black women, there's always this kind of push and pull of where they fit. And I really wanted to make sure that when we're talking about blues women, there is a unique story that is being told. And I think what's so interesting about blues music is that we're coming up on, the end of slavery. We're coming up into, early Jim Crow era, and we're looking at freedom. So what does Black freedom and liberation look like at this time? And what are the stories that, a lot of Black artists and musicians can talk about? And then what people can relate to. And so we start to see this diverge from the Black church, and we're starting to see this diverge from sacred music to talk about secular music.
I said, oh, baby, why you wanna do this, baby?
So we're moving through time, we're moving through genre. Where are you taking us next?
I mean, we can't go anywhere but jazz. Everybody knows that. Jazz was born in New Orleans. But ultimately, thinking about this timeline of blues, we're looking into the early 1920s and really thinking about what does Black migration look like. So the Great Migration being this extremely large, massive move towards, the West Coast and also the East Coast. But thinking about what is this really core time and what is this really core space, and what better way to talk about jazz than the Harlem Renaissance. Again, thinking about this history and this culture in the ways that Black artists and creators leaning on literature, leaning on painting, leaning on writing, leaning on music to again extend these stories.
The vibe in the jazz section is Art Deco, women in drop-waisted dresses, men in wide-legged suits and brimmed hats. We walk by a large gilt-edged mirror surrounded by expensive-looking wallpaper, a spot to make a phone call at the club when you step out from a set. While I'm listening to Adeerya, my attention is drawn to the center of the room.
So to really have these stellar pieces sit in the middle of this section of the exhibition is really cool.
I just got chills.
Yeah.
Walking over. This is
a
Miles Davis trumpet. So describe the trumpet for somebody who's not seeing it right now. I mean, again, I'm just really floored. Yeah.
I love Miles Davis so much. I love John Coltrane. And I really think, again, seeing a Miles Davis trumpet, the early 1980s Martin, trumpet, it's black and gold. It has really cool, pretty moons and stars and gold trimming. So to really see this trumpet in the space and for it to match the aesthetic of the gallery is really nice. Like, I didn't notice that until now. Like, we have these like slight hues of gold in the listening station, and the green kind of contrast with the colors really makes it stand out.
Next, Adeerya takes me into a living room from the 1970s. At least that's what it looks like, with cozy wood paneling and groovy colors. This section of the exhibit is all about soul.
Utilizing soul here was important because, again, the history of the civil rights movement, and I wanted to talk about the Black Power movements as well. And then for the idea of these echoes of how a lot of soul artists leaned in on blues music and sung in the church, thinking about how gospel and blues and jazz still kind of have these connections to soul music. So this section really leans on a lot of activism, but also, again, capturing like this vocal strength. So I really love when you come into the soul section, there's this beautiful picture of Aretha Franklin done by Lee Freelander that it's just so powerful, because you may have never heard an Aretha Franklin song, but you can see from this photo of her, in this bright green sweater and this really close-up shot of her singing, like, her voice is so strong and it's so powerful. For this section, again, it was important to talk about just the emergence of, these Black liberation movements and these organizations. So having commentary on social justice, talking about the rise of Black music labels, so talking about Stax Records that's coming out of Memphis and talking about Motown coming out of Detroit. These are really core points of history to show like how Black music is mobilizing, but also how now Black artists are actually getting paid for their music, and this is where that wealth starts to come in a little bit.
Stick with me here, but I'm feeling like once we're here in this like 1960s and 70s style living room, I can imagine a Black family at home with several generations in the house. And maybe the teenager is listening to Aretha, Marvin, Roberta, but their parents are more like, I don't know about this stuff. Or their grandparents are more like, I don't know about this stuff. I'm going to listen to my gospel. I'm going to listen to my jazz. But there are the threads pulling us through each successive generation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect way to describe the exhibition, honestly. The Echoes emphasis is not just the music, but also the ancestry of like Black community and family, and the ways that everybody who comes through this and reflects on their connection to like blues or jazz or soul. I mean, when I told my father about this exhibition, he's like, I listened to Buddy Guy, and I told you about Heavy D, and I told you about Billy. I'm just like, no, you didn't. But I mean, he did. My dad is definitely the inspiration to like just how much music I know, so I give him a lot of credit for that. But again, to your point about generations, and again, leaning on the idea of echoes, I couldn't do this exhibition without adding in Jimi Hendrix. So when you leave the soul section, you actually step into an Echoes Theater, where there's an in-house made oral history kind of documentary film. But also we have, Jimi Hendrix vinyls. Being
his own personal vinyls. And again, the privilege of MoPop being, the home to one of the largest Jimi Hendrix collections. We have that privilege. So again, I couldn't do this exhibition without bringing him up. And so to have him have this strong collection of music of Black artists, again, opens up this door again about what does Echoes look like for someone like Jimi Hendrix. And again, speaking to his love of Black music and seeing people like Nina Simone or Smokey Myers or the Four Tops or the Temptations in the collection really highlights his, special curation of music. And again, to think about the ways that a lot of these artists lean on these artists before them, So seeing how all these different genres connects to strengthen his sound is really important. This is so fun, Adeerya. I mean, before we go, I know you're going to have school groups coming through. You're going to have a lot of people coming through. What do you hope people take away from this exhibit when they go home?
That's such a tough question. There's so many good things in here. But I think I want people to know that pop culture looks so different for so many different people. And I think I want the key takeaway to be like Black history is so deeply intertwined to Black music. And Black people are so proud of their music, and Black people are so attached to their music because it has such a rich history And there's so much community and passion that exists where, when things get appropriated, it hurts because we've built so much context and history and connection to our music that, we want credit for, but we also want to feel protected from it because our music protects us.
So to remove it from that context feels like a violation.
Yeah, and again, it's important to us, and I think for Black folks who come into this space, I want them to feel seen. I want them to feel appreciated. I want them to feel joy. But I think for non-Black folks who experience the exhibit, I want them to learn something. I want them to see why we should appreciate Black music. Happy June for Black Music, month. But also, again, the idea that there's a really important history that sits here that Black people, are appreciative of. And I think for people to leave here is to feel inspired and to feel this connection to music that feels good. I think I did a really good job of picking music that makes us feel good. So, yeah, I want people to have fun and just to understand, and just respect the music that's in here.
Adeerya Johnson is the curator of Never Turn Back Echoes of African American Music at Seattle's Museum of Pop Culture. Adeerya, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had so much fun. Come back.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.